You couldn't explain how you ended up in this forest. At first, everything seemed normal, a quiet walk along a familiar path, a gentle breeze playing with your hair and filling your lungs with cool air. But something went wrong. The change was subtle at first, almost sneaky. The trees that once stood at a distance suddenly seemed to close in on you. The path you were following began to twist and turn, disappearing into the ground as if it had been swallowed whole. You stopped and looked around, trying to figure out where you were, but everything around you had become eerily unfamiliar. The forest, which you had known since childhood, had suddenly transformed into a strange, ominous place, filled with unsettling rustlings and shadows lurking in the dense canopy of trees. You decided it was best to turn back, but after just a few steps, you realized you had lost your bearings. The feeling of being watched gripped you, as if something or someone was hiding behind every tree, observing your every move. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by your labored breathing and the crunch of twigs underfoot. You decided to quicken your pace, but the forest seemed to conspire against you. The branches of the trees clung to your clothes like sticky hands that refused to let go. You felt panic rising inside you, but you pressed on, hoping to find some path that would lead you out of this trap. Suddenly, in the distance, you noticed movement between the trees. At first, you thought it might be another person lost in the forest, but as you looked closer, you realized it wasn't a person. The first thing you saw were its eyes, two glowing yellow orbs that burned in the darkness like wildfires. Then you made out the shape of its body, something enormous, hunched over, with long limbs and claws that gleamed in the dim moonlight. The creature was staring directly at you, and you knew it saw you just as clearly as you saw it. Your heart pounded so hard that it felt like it might burst through your chest. You stood frozen, unable to move, paralyzed by that terrifying gaze. Only one thought flickered in your mind: run. Before you could fully grasp what was happening, the creature began to move toward you, first slowly, as if savoring your fear, and then with astonishing speed. Its massive limbs left deep impressions in the ground, and the fangs protruding from its mouth seemed too large to belong to any living creature. You heard it growl a rough, menacing sound, and that was the final signal that sent you sprinting away. You dashed through the forest, not caring where you were going, just desperate to put as much distance between yourself and the creature as possible. The forest seemed to grow denser with every step, the trees closing in, creating a labyrinth with no escape. Branches lashed at your face, roots tangled around your feet, but you couldn't stop. The creature was right behind you, and you could hear its heavy breathing, its footsteps getting closer and closer. At some point, you realized you were completely lost. The forest had become a tightening noose around you, cutting off any chance of escape. Panic consumed you entirely, your mind blank except for the instinct to flee. But with every step, you only became more entangled in this dark, oppressive world. You burst into a small clearing and froze. The creature was right there. You could see it clearly now, a massive, fur-covered beast with long claws, glowing yellow eyes, and a mouth full of enormous fangs. It looked at you with a ferocious, primal hunger. You made one last desperate dash, but suddenly tripped over a root and crashed to the ground. Darkness swallowed everything around you, and for a moment, all was silent. Your body refused to move, and the creature slowly approached, its shadow looming over you. You could feel its breath on your face, hear its rough growl right next to your ear, and in that moment you knew it was the end. The creature loomed over you, ready to strike the final blow. And then you woke up. You were lying in your bed, drenched in cold sweat. Your heart was pounding in your chest, and the room was filled with an absolute silence. You couldn't believe it had just been a dream, too real, too horrifying to be merely a product of your mind. You sat up in bed, trying to steady yourself. The fear slowly began to ebb away, but the feeling that something was still watching you lingered. You looked around, but the room was empty. It was just a dream you repeated to yourself over and over. But deep down, there was an unsettling feeling that the forest and the creature chasing you were more than just a figment of your imagination. They were something more, something real. You could feel it, and you knew that the next time you set foot on that path, there was a chance that this nightmare might just become reality. You tried to fall asleep again, but couldn't. That horrifying growl still echoed in your mind, and in the darkness, it seemed as though those yellow eyes were still watching you from the corner of the room.